Welcome to the deep dive. You've brought us some really fascinating stuff this time. Excerpts from Ann Hooper's Kama Sutra for 21st century lovers.
That's right.
So today, we're really taking a journey, aren't we, through like centuries of thinking about intimacy, connection.
Exactly. And what's great about Hooper's work is it's not just one book, it's a synthesis, really.
Yeah, sure.
It pulls together the Kama Sutra, obviously, but also the Anangaranga, that means stage of the bodiless one,
Wow.
and the perfumed garden, even ancient Chinese wisdom from the Tao.
So it's like a cross-cultural greatest hits of sensuality.
Kind of, yeah. A way to see how different people across ages tackled, our sensual lives.
It really gets you thinking. And just to give everyone a little taste, here's something intriguing we found.
Go on.
The Kama Sutra, right? Everyone thinks complex acrobatic positions.
Mm-hmm. The stereotype.
But originally, it seems it only listed 8 basic ones. Just
Yeah.
8.
Yeah, and that's key, isn't it? Those 8 were like the foundation.
Right.
The springboard for all the variations that came later, it kind of shows that the core ideas might be simpler than we think.
Okay, so let's dig into the roots here. The history, the philosophy behind these texts, starting with the big one, the Kama Sutra.
Okay.
Compiled, what, between the 1st and 4th centuries AD by a Brahmin Vatsyana.
Right, Vatsyana. And being a Brahmin, a member of the highest priestly caste, that context is important.
How so?
Well, his worldview, as presented in the text, saw life having 3 main goals, 3 tenets.
Okay, which were?
Dharma, that's religious duty, sort of virtue. Artha, which is about, security, worldly success. And then Kama.
Kama, love, sensual pleasure, that whole area.
Exactly. And Vatsyana wasn't just writing a sex manual in the modern sense. His goal was to help people, specifically noblemen initially, excel at Kama.
Why noblemen?
Well, that was his primary audience, reflecting the society. But the idea was that a deeper, more profound experience of Kama contributed to a fuller life, maybe even spiritually.
Right, you mentioned this connection he draws between ecstatic orgasm and nirvana, like a mini heaven.
Yeah, that's how some interpret it. It suggests pleasure wasn't just physical, but potentially a path to, a higher state, however briefly.
So a society, or parts of it anyway, that saw pleasure as legitimate, vital even, not just for making babies.
Precisely. And while it was initially aimed at men, reflecting the times, it's not totally one-sided. It actually spends a fair bit of time on how men could, arouse and please women.
Okay, like what?
Details on different kinds of kisses, touches, even positions where the woman takes the lead.
Really? That seems, pretty aware for that period.
It does suggest a recognition of female desire, yeah. For instance, recommending women on top if the man's tired, or just for variety.
So there's a hint of female agency in there.
I think so, yeah. It's not just passive.
And getting down to the practical stuff.
Yeah.
He even suggested specific positions for different body types.
That's right. Like, the wife of Indra for a smaller man and a deeper woman, or the twining position for the opposite.
Ancient anatomical considerations.
It makes you wonder about their level of understanding, doesn't it? Maybe not scientific, like ours, but based on careful observation of what, fits.
Okay, so fast forward quite a bit. How did this text even reach the West?
That's largely down to Sir Richard Burton, the Victorian explorer.
Right, him and his colleague Arbuthnot, around 1883.
Yep. And you have to imagine the context. Victorian England, extremely reserved about sex.
So publishing it was pretty scandalous.
Hugely. Burton actually had to set up a private society, the Kama Sutra Society, so people could buy it sort of under the counter to avoid prosecution for obscenity.
Which probably only added to its mystique, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. Made it forbidden fruit.
And then, just a couple of years later, Burton and Arbuthnot published another text, didn't they? The Anangaranga.
He did, meaning stage of the bodiless one.
Referring to Kama, the Hindu god of love, again.
Exactly. It draws on similar ancient sources as the Kama Sutra, but it was actually written down much later, around AD 1172.
And India had changed by then.
Somewhat, yeah. The text suggests extramarital sex was more frowned upon compared to the earlier period Vatsyana might have been writing in.
So the focus shifted.
It seems so. The author, Kalyana Manala, was quite explicit. He said he wrote it to stop married couples getting bored with each other sexually.
Tackling marital boredom, offering varied pleasures to keep things interesting.
Precisely. He saw routine as a threat to the marriage itself.
That's interesting timing, too. Wasn't it written just before the Crusades?
Roughly, yes.
Yeah.
And the Crusades, despite being conflicts, led to this weird cultural exchange.
How so?
Well, Crusaders returning to Europe brought back some Eastern ideas about, well, eroticism. Things like bathing, perfumes, maybe more emphasis on foreplay.
So these ideas were slowly filtering across cultures, even back then.
It seems that way, influencing how people thought about intimacy bit by bit.
Okay, text number 3. The Perfumed Garden. This one's from 16th century Tunisia, Sheikh Nafsawi.
That's the one. And what's really noticeable about this text is it goes way beyond just positions.
Okay.
It gets into sensual foods, aphrodisiacs, what makes a partner desirable. It's more holistic, maybe, a broader picture of sensuality.
And it seems Nafsawi really emphasized pleasing women.
Definitely. He describes the ideal man as being anxious to please them, talks about the ideal erection.
And he had some very specific ideas about female anatomy.
He did, favoring a large lower belly, projecting and fleshy vulva,
Yeah.
and quite notably, a vagina that was narrow and not moist.
Not moist. That
Yeah.
sounds counterintuitive to modern Western ideas.
Exactly. And that's a huge cultural difference marker. In some Arabic traditions, then and sometimes even now, dryness was thought to increase friction and pleasure for the man. It's a stark reminder that desirability is really culturally constructed.
Wow. Okay. And the last source mentioned is the Tao, ancient Chinese wisdom. This predates all the others, right?
By a long way, yes. Taoism is fundamentally about harmony, finding the path, the Tao, the natural way the universe works.
And sex was part of that path, not something separate or taboo.
Very much part of it in ancient Taoist thought, unlike maybe some later, more austere interpretations. It's all about yin and yang.
The classic complementary forces.
Mhm.
Yin is negative, passive, nurturing, female.
Generally associated with the feminine, yes.
Huh.
And yang is positive, active, consuming, associated with the masculine.
Always seeking balance.
Right. And sexual union was seen as a really powerful way to exchange these energies, to balance them. Orgasm was the peak point of that exchange.
And they advocated for protracted stimulation, for health benefits.
Yes, not just pleasure, but also vitality energy. The Tao of sex was actually one of 8 pillars of their wisdom.
8 pillars.
Yeah, believed to improve health, relationships, spiritual growth, maybe even extend life. They saw it as deeply integrated.
It sounds like a very holistic view.
Absolutely, and they approached it with artistry, too. The names for the positions are so evocative.
Like galloping horse.
And butterflies in flight. It suggests a real playfulness, an imaginative quality.
Okay, so we've got the background, Kama Sutra, Anangaranga, perfumed garden, the Tao.
Quite a mix.
A rich tapestry, definitely.
Now let's pivot to the practical advice. Stuff modern lovers might actually, take inspiration from, starting with preparing for love.
Right. A big theme across these texts is erogenous zones, the whole body, basically.
Not just the obvious bits.
Exactly. Vatsyayana had this great piece of advice. He should always make a point of pressing those parts of her body on which she turns her eyes.
That's simple but smart. Pay attention to nonverbal cues. See what they focus on.
It's about discovery, isn't it? Finding out what uniquely pleases your partner.
And the modern commentary rightly points out that men get pleasure from breast and nipple play, too, which Vatsyayana didn't really cover.
True. The texts then list all sorts of zones: hands, ears, back of the neck, underside of the knee, feet.
Apparently. The massage advice suggests stimulating the feet can create sensations up into the inner thighs. It just shows how interconnected everything is.
It really pushes the idea that intimacy is about the whole body, the whole experience.
Definitely. Not just genital contact.
Another thing mentioned is bathing together.
Ah, yes. The warmth, relaxation, the shared vulnerability. It's presented as a great prelude. Creates connection before things get explicitly sexual.
Like setting the stage.
Exactly. That simple act of washing your partner can build incredible intimacy and anticipation.
Grooming and massage also feature heavily. Tender, erotic rediscovery.
Mm-hmm. They even talked about massage oils back then. Almond, coconut, scented with rose, jasmine. The book gives modern DIY ideas, too.
And different types of touch.
Yeah, circling strokes, using just fingertips, light feathering touches, lots of variety. Plus specific tips for back rubs, arms, shoulders, head massage.
It sounds very thoughtful. And Vatsyayana emphasized fragrance and cleanliness too, right?
Yes, engaging all the senses was clearly important.
Okay, what about kissing? More than just lips, apparently.
Oh, much more. Touch, taste, smell, emotion. Vatsyayana saw it as an art form. He even had different types of kisses for different situations.
Types of kisses? Like what?
Well, The book mentions demonstrative kisses, transferred kisses, like kissing something then touching it to the partner, kisses showing specific intentions. It's quite detailed.
So even a simple kiss could be layered with meaning.
That's the idea. And he specifically mentioned breast kissing and kissing other body parts, always stressing sensitivity.
The text also mentioned licking as foreplay.
Yes, building anticipation. And then they get pretty explicit about oral sex, cunnilingus and fellatio,
With techniques.
surprisingly detailed ones. For cunnilingus, licking the labia, different strokes, focusing on the clitoris, the importance of lubrication is stressed.
That's quite specific for ancient texts.
It is. And for fellatio, it even mentions Vatsyayana describing 8 kinds supposedly used by eunuchs, plus a modern take called the butterfly flick.
Wow. It really treats these acts as skills to be honed, doesn't it?
Yeah, to maximize pleasure for everyone involved. The detail is quite something.
All right, let's shift to the main event for many people when they think of these texts, exploring the positions.
Right. Though, as we said, maybe not as central as the reputation suggests.
We start with variations on man on top, from the basic yawning posture to things like wife of Indra and crab's position.
And these variations aren't just for novelty. They change the depth, the angle, what gets stimulated for each person.
And Vatsyayana's advice about using the penis like a vibrator.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. He described different movements, blow of the bull, sporting of the sparrow. It shows a focus on the quality of movement, not just the position itself.
Then there are positions where the woman leads. Pair of tongs, the top.
The top comes with a funny warning about potentially falling over.
Well, laughs, good to know.
But these positions explore that dynamic of control and surrender, which can be very erotic. Pair of tongs involves her using pelvic floor muscles, which is interesting.
What about side by side? Lateral positions.
Yep, they're in there too. Offering different kinds of closeness, different angles, and rear entry, the 6th posture. The text says it can generate atavistic feelings.
Primal stuff.
Maybe tapping into something more instinctual, yeah.
Sitting, standing positions too, for the adventurous.
Absolutely. Accomplishing position, rising position. Though they do note practical things, like you need to be similar heights for some standing ones.
Common sense prevails.
Even back then, the variety just shows there are so many ways to connect physically. Even the slightly impractical ones suggest a spirit of play.
And the other texts add more positions. Ananga Ranga.
Yeah, Anangaranga classifies positions sometimes based on its idea of 4 types of women. Unique ones like paired feet position.
Perfumed garden.
That one seems more focused on angles of entry. 4th posture, with legs in the air. Also side-lying ones like love's fusion.
So each text has its own flavor, its own emphasis.
It seems like it, yeah. Reflecting its specific time and culture, perhaps.
And the teo, we mentioned the poetic names.
Swallows in love, silkworm spinning a cocoon, beautiful names, plus that sets of 9 thrusting technique.
Sets of 9.
Yeah, specific patterns like 9 shallow thrusts followed by 1 deep one repeated. It suggests a very mindful, rhythmic approach.
Almost meditative.
Could be. And the Tao also had positions for specific situations dealing with aging or erectile difficulties, the one who stays at home.
Practical.
And even playful ones, rainbow arch, autumn dog, where sex is almost treated like a fun game, a joke between partners.
So the range is huge. Practical, spiritual, playful.
Exactly. It covers a lot of ground.
Okay, moving on to insights into desire, arousal, and orgasm. What do they have to say?
Well, the Anangaranga talked about 3 intensities of desire.
Which were?
Furious appetite, a moderate desire, and slow kindling. Just acknowledging it's not always the same level, you know?
Makes sense. And orgasm.
Generally understood as that release of tension built up.
Yeah.
Vatsyayana, interestingly, also included bits about sorcery and magic.
Spells and potions.
Yeah, recipes and charms, reflecting the beliefs of the time. The modern book wisely adds a disclaimer, of course.
Laughs. Probably best not to rely on ancient magic for modern romance.
Agreed. But it's a fascinating window into their world where maybe those lines were more blurred.
The modern perspective brings in things like Kegel exercises for women.
Right, strengthening the pelvic floor for better sensation and control. And it outlines the modern 3 stages of sexual response.
But the Taoists had their own take on female orgasm. 9 levels.
So they believed, yes, linked to that idea of prolonged stimulation and balancing yin-yang energy. It's a very different framework.
They also had that concept of ejaculation.
Yes, the idea of the man consciously retaining semen during orgasm, redirecting the energy internally. Again, a very different view of climax and its purpose.
Shifting focus a bit to Relationships and dynamics. What about courtship?
Vatsiana had advice there too. Be kind, give gifts, even feign a little reluctance sometimes.
Playing hard to get. Ancient style.
Kind of, though the commentary warns against overdoing that bit today. But it reflects the formal courtship rituals of his era. Kindness and generosity, though those are timeless.
He also advised choosing partners based on compatibility, right? Not just money.
Yeah, compatibility and social standing, temperament. And fascinatingly, he gave advice for managing multiple wives.
Which was common then. How does that apply now?
Well, the principles he outlines, fairness, communication, managing jealousy, some argue they have surprising relevance for modern blended families or sequential relationships. How to foster harmony in complex setups.
Interesting. Being unselfish, acting like an older sister sometimes?
It's about navigating tricky interpersonal stuff, whatever the structure.
What about this interchange of coition and women acting the part of a man?
It basically points to fluidity in roles during sex. It wasn't rigidly defined. Either partner could be more active or passive, taking initiative.
Okay. And finally, let's touch on the Taoist perspective on sex and spirituality again. That balance of yin and yang.
Crucial for them. Sex as a way to achieve harmony. They even had symbolic meanings. The penis representing God, possessing 5 virtues.
What are virtues?
Kindness, righteousness, courteousness, wisdom, and honesty. Quite a high standard.
Laughs indeed. And the deer exercise.
A practice for both men and women, involving muscle contractions, believed to strengthen sexual organs and circulate energy.
And ultimately, for Taoists, loving sex could be a spiritual path.
That's the highest expression of it, yes. A profound merging of energies that could lead to experiencing the divine or the Tao. Intimacy as transcendence.
It adds a really deep layer to it all.
Definitely elevates it beyond just the physical.
Now, we absolutely have to add a modern note. A word on safer sex.
Crucial. These texts are ancient. They predate any understanding of STIs.
So while the wisdom on pleasure is fascinating,
Condoms and safer practices are non-negotiable in the 21st century. The commentary in Hooper's book makes that clear too. Protection is paramount.
absolutely. Okay, so we've journeyed through quite a bit. Kama Sutra, Anangaranga, Perfume Garden, Tao. Centuries of thought.
We really have.
What are the main takeaways for our listeners, do you think?
Well, I think it shows that seeking fulfilling intimacy isn't new, is it? It's a timeless human thing.
Right.
And we've seen so many different angles, practical techniques, philosophical ideas, cultural variations, but a common thread seems to be that it's about more than just the physical act.
Intention, connection, well-being.
Exactly. Looking after the whole person, the whole relationship, not just focusing on mechanics.
It really does feel like an art of love, like the title suggests. Less about ticking boxes, maybe.
I think so. Which leads to maybe a final thought, a question for people listening.
Okay.
Considering all this ancient wisdom, these different approaches, how could bringing some of that mindfulness, that focus on holistic pleasure, enrich your experience of intimacy today in our super fast-paced world?
That's a great question. Maybe the art is less about mastery and more about awareness, connection.
Perhaps. It's something to think about, definitely.
We really encourage everyone to reflect on these ideas. Maybe even, explore the source material further if it sparks something.
Who knows what other surprising insights you might find? What dimensions these ancient texts could illuminate in your own life?
It's definitely an ongoing exploration.